Episode 18, the Photime Podcast. Rob Riggs from Mobilinkd with his brand new Bluetooth-enabled TNC2. We're going to learn about APRS, TNCs, digipeters, and more coming up.
AmateurRadio15.com presents Photime, the other ham radio podcast. Sponsored by Main Trading Company. Find them online at mtcradio.com. Now, here's your host, Cale Nelson, K4CDN.
It is episode number 18 of the Photime Podcast. I'm Cale, Kilo 4 Charlie Delta November. You can find us online at itsphotime.com, or if you prefer the other address is amateurradio15.com, amateurradio15.com. We have two URLs, and just trying to make it easy for you if you're typing it on your mobile device. It's photime.com. Hey, the listener survey is still up. We appreciate all of you who have been there and completed the survey. I'd like to have some more, so I'm going to leave it up until this episode post and maybe a few days following to encourage you who have not participated yet to go ahead and do that. Seriously, it takes like 4 minutes, and I really want to hear from you. We've got some great results so far, and thank you to those who have participated. And, not a whole lot of bad to say about the podcast, and that's exciting for someone who's doing this, and we appreciate it so tremendously. All right, so we also appreciate our show sponsor, mtcradio.com. That's Christy, Richard, and Tammy down in the Paris, Texas area. You don't live in Texas? Not a problem. Most orders over $99 ship for free, and they have a really timely turnaround on orders. I'm talking like the next day they're shipping them. I've had a lot of great success with them. That's why I asked them to participate here as a sponsor on the show, and really tickled to be have them a part of the Photime team. So check them out, mtcradio.com. They've got all sorts of gear, new and used, and I'm sure that if you're needing something, they can probably help you out. Even if you don't see it on the website, give them a call. At least give them a chance. I think once you do business with them, you'll understand why I come back every single time and tell you to check out mtcradio.com. Hey, just really quickly, if you go to the Photime website and click on the shopping link, you'll see a link there to the Amazon affiliate store. Thank you for those who buy from there. You also see a link to MTC Radio, our show sponsor. There's a link to get you right to their store there. There's also a new link. It's a APRS link. So if you're looking for some Photime gear, t-shirts, hats, coffee mugs, Snuggies, whatever you're looking for, seriously, we've got a Snuggie on there. It looks kind of like a monk costume. It's kind of funny, but just go check it out. It's listed there in the blog. The shopping tab, pull it down. The APRS is there. If you want to buy a shirt and express your love publicly for the Photime Podcast, we'll appreciate it. Take some pictures, send it to us. We'll put them on Facebook, make you famous. All right, okay, we're here for an episode. We're not here to listen to Cale talk about T-shirts. We're here to talk with Rob Riggs. Now, Rob, he's got a great story, and I don't want to burn it up for him, so I'm going to let him tell you the story. But Rob is offering a great little piece of equipment for those of us who are interested in APRS and maybe some mobile APRS using our handy-talkies or our walkie-talkies. What does all of that mean? You're scratching your head. This is going to... No. Trust me, you're new. You don't know what I just said. Rob's going to explain it and make it make sense. That's why we have the smart people on the show to help people like me understand what we're talking about, okay? So we're going to go ahead and bring in Rob now. Rob, thank you for coming on to the Photime Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really glad about what you're doing here with this show. It's really great.
Well, thanks. Rob and I have been corresponding for quite some time to get together on the air to share with you about what he was doing. And in the midst of all that, I had a really great Christmas list made, and I emailed it to my wife, who was just learning how to use email on her phone. And I said, I want X, Y, and Z, and they're all from Mobilinkd. And Christmas morning came and went with no TNC. And then I went on the webpage to order me one for myself and found out that Rob had sold out. So I actually was able to purchase the new version, the TNC2, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But Rob, tell us a little bit about the history of you coming into amateur radio? How you find yourself here?
Well, sure. The history starts long, long ago when I was probably about 10, 12 years old and building kits from Radio Shack and from Heathkit for software listening and that sort of stuff. And I really wanted to get into amateur radio. I actually had the ARRL handbook for many years sitting on the shelf and actually pretty worn as I read through it. But, as you get older and, those things slip to the side. And it wasn't until a few years ago where I moved to Chicago, my world kind of got turned upside down and I was feeling a little bit bored. Discovered the RTL SDR, started playing around with that. And one thing led to another and, got into ham radio. And pretty quickly from there started getting into electronics again, which I hadn't done. I'm a software engineer by trade. I've been doing that for 20, 30 years now. And, this kind of gets me away from that. Building big systems for big companies, I can sit down and write embedded systems on these really small microcontrollers. It's a good escape for me. It's a nice hobby.
Fantastic. Rob, what is your amateur call sign? Because I don't even have it anywhere.
Oh, well, yeah, my amateur call sign is WX90.
WX90. That's a nice 2x2. 2x1, rather. Yeah,
2x1. One of the things I started getting into, I went pretty quickly from technician all the way to extra. I actually became an extra so that I could operate internationally in the UK, and was doing some satellite work and spitting out my 2x3 was getting a little bit rough when you're trying to catch a really quick pass of those birds. So I got myself a 2x1. Really lucky with that one.
Fantastic. Yeah, those don't exist anymore in Foreland. So as I begin to pursue the extra, I'm having to find some. I'm looking for something unique, and the Whiskey X-Ray looks nice, by the way, as I've written it down over there. I like that. Yeah. Well, thank you again for being here with us. And guys, I didn't know, but Rob is really into the SDR dongles, so maybe we can have him back on another time to share with that, because we get a lot of email, get a lot of messaging about, hey, we want to learn more about the RTL SDR dongle. And that, for you guys that are maybe new or don't really know what the heck we're talking about, it's about a $15 to $20 device. It's a USB dongle that you can plug into your computer and use basically as a receiver for all sorts of radio bandwidth. But not to get too far away from topic, I want to talk to you about your TNC and the APRS. Now, that's, as I mentioned earlier, before we got started here, one of the top topics that we receive a request to discuss here on the program is the APRS. And can you share a little bit about what APRS is for you with a listener?
Well, sure. For me, APRS is, it's just another communication medium that us hams have access to. It's a way of sending notifications and bulletins, keeping our fellow hams apprised of what's going on in our neighborhood. One of the things we use APRS for here in Chicago is announcing the repeaters that are nearby. So if you happen to be, out of town driving through, you can see what repeaters are there. Many of the radios that have APRS built in allow you to immediately QSY to the repeater frequencies that are being broadcast. It also allows people to play around, send messages to each other. It's not a robust messaging platform, but it is it can be used. I love actually working International Space Station, being able to send quick messages to fellow hams 1,000 miles away as it passes overhead. That to me is just a lot of fun, and APRS.FI is this mapping system. It's built on top of Google Maps. It allows you to see all the fellow hams in your area or wherever you want to look. You can see what APRS activity is going on, and it's a great tool. It's a lot of fun to use.
A lot of people, when they think about APRS, they think, oh, it's GPS tracking, but it's a lot deeper than that.
It really is. Some of the things that APRS is used for around here. I'm lucky to be a member of a club, the North Shore Radio Club here in Chicago, and they do a lot with APRS when the marathon, the Chicago Marathon's in town. They're helping out with aid stations, that sort of thing. Keeping track of supplies and of people. And they also use it for road bike races, bicycle races, where you need to keep track of where some of the aid vehicles are, where the leaders are, and that sort of thing. So in that case, that's where GPS does come in handy. But just being able to use it for its information reporting capabilities is hugely important as well.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about what you intended to do with this device that you developed, the TNC and now the TNC2.
Well, what I intended to do initially was to create a cool little TNC for myself that was battery powered, that I could just strap onto one of my radios and play around with. I actually had discovered APRS Droid early on, and Georg, who's the author of that, he had put in their support for Bluetooth KISS TNC. Now, I had been playing around with a KISS TNC based off of the Arduino, and happened to have just got in a Bluetooth dongle for that Arduino, and started playing around with it, and sure enough, I could actually talk between the two. I showed this off to a few friends, and they were just so excited to see that. I ended up taking it, going down to Radio Shack, getting a few PCB boards, and building this thing onto a small circuit board that I could stick in a little plastic case and strap onto my radio. And I had this self-contained unit that would just go anywhere. And the interface that you get with APRS Droid is so much better than I've seen with just about any other radio with a TNC built into it. I have a Kenwood D72, and that thing is great, but and it's a phenomenal radio. But the user interface is nowhere near what you get with APRS Droid. And so one thing led to another. I showed this off to enough people that people were wanting one, and I didn't have time to actually go off and make these things. But the more people wanted one, the more I thought, well, what would it actually take for me to manufacture something like this? I've never manufactured electronics before. So it was quite a learning experience. It probably took me 6-9 months to figure out, what do I have to do to manufacture it? Where can I get it manufactured? How do I actually even prototype this thing? What do I have to worry about? That was a huge learning experience for me.
Nothing like entrepreneurship to get in the way.
Yeah, well, it was very accidental.
So, I mean, you really kind of stumbled over into this just by your own personal innovation and working towards a specific goal of your own.
Yeah, and the encouragement of my fellow hams. If these folks hadn't really expressed interest in it and gave me the encouragement to pursue this, I wouldn't be here. So it's we have a great community, I think, in ham radio here in the U.S. and around the world. Georg, who DO1 GL is in Germany, who created APRS Droid. We communicated back and forth about the product, and I think my TNC was one of the first to actually take advantage of some of the features that he had put in there, and we got to flesh out some of those features a little bit better, and he was hugely encouraging. It was just I couldn't have done it without the help of others, for sure.
Going back real quick to a comment you made just a moment ago about how the APRS Droid is such an easier user interface versus a APRS radio, handheld type radio. Now, a lot of guys may be sitting there scratching their head when you say that, but to me, it brings to the mind that we're using an Android device, so we have a screen to look at, usually in color, whether it's a tablet or a phone. Is that why you're saying that this interface is so much easier to use and operate versus the handheld type radio?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have this wonderful, rich user interface device. When I was using the radio, the Kenwood, it almost felt like I was, when I was using it for messaging, for example, it felt like I was back in the 90s doing texting off of my phone, using a 10-key keypad. And going and using APRS Droid, I had a keyboard there. Right. I had maps that were, the Google Maps, the offline maps that are available, gave me a much richer experience that you really don't get in a radio. Well, the built-in radios that you have today.
Yeah. I just wanted to go back and nail that down so guys would understand that what we're talking about here, guys, is a device that you connect to your radio, and through the magic of Bluetooth technology, you can connect it to a Bluetooth-enabled Android device, whether it's a Nexus tablet or the latest, greatest Samsung phone or whatever, or one of the $9 ones that I encouraged you to buy from Dollar General back before Christmas. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the technology, and what I actually received in the mail today was a very small black box. Tell us about the black box.
Yeah, so it's just a small black box. It's got 2 ports on there and 1 button. There's an on-off button. That's all that exists, and when you turn it on, it'll start flashing at you. That's that the Bluetooth device is turned on and listening. It's got the 2 ports on the side there. There's one that goes from the TNC to the radio. And then the other is a USB port that doesn't have any data connections. It's just used for charging the internal battery. And that's all there really is. So the connection between the TNC and the radio controls push to talk, and then it has the audio in and audio out. So it receives the audio over the air, decodes it, and sends the data that it's decoded via Bluetooth to the Android device, or to a PC or a Mac with a Bluetooth connector. It doesn't have to be an Android, but the primary design for this was to strap onto an HT and use with a mobile phone. A lot of one of the motivations behind creating this is I have a couple of TNCs here, and they all require just a mass of cables. They don't have their own power, so you can't really. They're not super portable. When I've seen people using it in their cars, they've got cables all over the place. It's got to be plugged in to the cigarette lighter and into a laptop, and this thing is meant to go places. Now, the other thing that I took care with when I built this is I used to be, when I was in Colorado, a very avid backpacker. So being able to have something that is very lightweight, small, and keeps its charge for a very long time was important to me. And this thing weighs less than 2 ounces. It's got a battery that will last basically 48 to anywhere from 2 to 4 days of continuous use on it. So it's perfect for taking out in the middle of nowhere for a week at a time.
As you were describing that, we've covered a lot of SOTA and some IOTA here on the program, and I was thinking, wow, this is perfect for somebody that's doing a Summits on the Air or an Islands on the Air. Do you have a lot of guys using that? A lot of operators using it for that purpose?
I haven't really heard of a lot of operators using it for that purpose yet. I would imagine that they would. I mean, that's perfect design for that. But I think some of the Islands on the Air SOTA is done with some of that stuff's done more with HF. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking it'd be a good way for them to be able to be followed as they were going up to the summit or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So it is extremely light. It's extremely small. I mean, it's not much larger than, and it's only a little bit longer, but no wider than a battery from one of the little Chinese walkie-talkies. I mean, it's a very small, lightweight unit. And it looks like it's 3D printed. Is it 3D printed?
The case is 3D printed, yeah.
Fantastic.
A lot of this is to keep the cost down. The amount of money it costs to actually design, to do injection molding is pretty high. It would add considerably to the cost of this thing. And I want to get this into the hands of as many hams as I can.
Well, we tried to contribute to that. We caught wind of the fact you were pre-selling them, the TNC2, and a couple of guys along with myself ordered them, and it was so sickening because they all received theirs like Wednesday, and the Postal Service lost mine. And I was wanting to, I was like, I'm going to get it, and I'll be able to turn it on and use it and try to figure it out, have a bunch of questions for Rob. And I got it today on my way in to make the call, but that's okay. I'm still really excited to have it. It was not it wasn't a Mobilinkd problem. It was an Uncle Sam problem, if you can imagine that. Tell me a little bit about the connections via Bluetooth. We understand the push to talk and whatnot. Now, all of my radios use the Kenwood connector, the 2-pin. That's the one you sent me, along with the little ferrite bead there.
Yeah.
Let's go from the mic connection into the TNC2, and then from the TNC2 via the Bluetooth back to the Android device. Yeah.
So. From the mic connection, all right. So if you're going to send a position report through the Bluetooth through the radio, we'll just say for the moment that you're using APRS Droid. APRS Droid will send the signal to determine what your location is from the onboard GPS unit, and send that construct an APRS sentence. Send that out via a KISS command over Bluetooth. It's just to the Android device. It's a serial port, really, and to any device, it's just talking over serial port protocol, and that gets sent to the TNC. The TNC decodes that. The APR. Well, actually, it doesn't really decode anything. It just takes that and modulates that signal out to the radio. It handles the push to talk, so when it's ready to send, it keys the radio. It sends a preamble out so that other radios that are listening have a chance to sync up with that signal, and then sends the data out on the air.
Fantastic, and it receives as well.
Yes, so the receiving is happens in the opposite. So the radio will be sitting there listening. You can operate it with either the squelch open or the squelch closed. If the squelch is closed, the radio has to open squelch pretty darn quickly for it to catch all of the APRS packets. So one of the issues that you have is, with some of the Chinese radios, they tend to open squelch fairly slowly. Mm-hmm. And with those, it's often helpful just to run with the squelch wide open. And the TNC has a data carrier detect. If you're running with the squelch open, you set the data carrier detect on there, and it will determine, it'll sit there and read the static that's on the air constantly until it detects a signal. It'll detect that there's data there, and then it'll start decoding that. When it gets a complete sentence for an APRS sentence, it sends that across serial link through Bluetooth, and which gets sent over Bluetooth to the APRS Droid application, and that'll pop up either a position report in there on the map, or bring up a message if you're sending a message. I often find that the log interface in APRS Droid is really handy. You can see all the traffic that's coming through. Fantastic,
and it's. Going back, you mentioned Radio Shack. I worked there in high school, and it was a lot of fun. We used to sell cell phones that worked in the cell around the tower, and it's just astounding to me, 25, 30 years later, what we're capable of doing with our radios here, and with a wireless connection between one device to another to pass that information. It's just... it's kind of overwhelming, and I think a lot of the APRS things are overwhelming, especially for guys who don't have maybe have a lot of folks in their local community that are doing APRS. It can be kind of overwhelming or frightening, for lack of a better term. But
We've had a few customers who want to get into APRS, and they're out in the middle of nowhere. They buy the TNC, they plug it in, and then they're wondering why they're not showing up in APRS.fi, or they're not hearing any traffic. If you look at where they are on the map, there isn't any APRS traffic nearby.
They're one of 4 amateurs in a 100-mile radius or something.
Yeah, well, I mean it's in some areas of the country that's not super uncommon.
Yeah. Hey, I got a couple of questions from some listeners I want to get to in just a moment, but let's hear real quickly from Main Trading Company, and we'll be right back with Rob Riggs from Mobilinkd.
Visit mtcradio.com today, a great one-stop mom-and-pop shop for everything ham radio. Radios, antennas, power supplies, wire and cable, books and training materials, microphones, headsets, and accessories. Find popular brands like MFJ, Heil Sound, Jetstream, LDG, Alinco, Comet, Texas Bugcatcher, Radio Waves, and more. mtcradio.com, an authorized Kenwood and ICOM dealer. mtcradio.com.
Want to give a shout out real quick to some of our most recent podcast reviews real quickly from iTunes. Maybe the last time I've heard from you, or you've heard from me regarding these reviews, probably like last year. So let's see. Nick says it's a great source of information for the new ham or those interested in the ham radio hobby. Easy to listen to with an overall good audio quality. Excellent topics on various activities within the ham radio hobby. As a tech, it's motivating me to get a general. Yeah. Good job, Cale. Thanks, man. And good job, Nick. Keep being motivated there. Greg says it's a great show. He just recently found this ham radio podcast and enjoys it. He's still catching up on the other episodes from what he's missed. Well, we've only got 17, so we'll have you, bro, before long, right? All right, Sir Flylot01 says, I really enjoy it. What else can I say? I look forward to the episodes and listen intently. Great quality, great job. John Jacob says, it's the best ham radio podcast. This is a great podcast. Introduces you to different elements of ham radio in an entertaining way. Yeah, I can even read. That's got to be entertaining, right? Cold Steel. I'm a new ham, another no-code general class operator. I'm part of a club, but I am limited in attendance due to a crazy work schedule. I'm able to learn new parts of this hobby through Cale and the other guest commentators as they describe their experiences in the hobby. A few months ago, I didn't know what APRS, MCOM, SOTA, or IOTA was. I very much appreciate the open and giving nature of the show. No one slams or belittles others in the hobby. Nah, it's not going to happen here. That's not allowed. There's tools everywhere, and we're not going to have them on the show. Before we get back to Rob real quick, big shout out to Bill, Kevin, Sean, Ken, James, Harold, John, Dean, and others, some of our Facebook followers, but that's enough of us. Let's get back to Rob Riggs with the TNC2 from Mobilinkd. Okay, so we're back with Rob Riggs from Mobilinkd. And Rob, give us your web address real quickly, because I haven't even brought that up, but folks can't go buy your product if they don't know where to go.
Sure. Well, it should be pretty easy. It's www.mobilinkd, MOBILINKD.com.
It's pretty simple, guys. And when you get there, you want to click on the TNC2 tab or the shop tab.
Yeah, or the store tab will take you to our online store where you can buy the TNC2.
And don't be afraid. There's manuals to be downloaded there. And I didn't realize this, Rob, but just last week or so, I went to a ham fest with a new ham friend of mine. He recently moved in this area, and we were talking. I was like, "Oh yeah, man, I've got a call coming up in a week or so with Rob from Mobilinkd. It's this really." And he's like, "Oh, I've got one of those." He's got the version 1. And I said, really? He said, yeah, I love it, man. So I didn't even realize that I've got a tutor. So Justin, get ready to tutor. But I've got some, I'll just explain it this way. Just the other day, I went on the Facebook and a couple of forums I participated in and said, hey, I'm going to be talking to Rob Riggs from Mobilinkd. And do you guys have any questions? And this is the first time I've done this on the program, and I don't know why I haven't thought of it before. But since we had just recently had this discussion online about the TNC2 being released and the pre-sale and whatnot, I thought it was just a great time to come back and get some listener feedback. And there's a lot of them, but we'll try to touch on a couple of them. I got one question here, and I think I know what the guy's asking. He says, when does Mac Linux software compatible with this unit and its uses? I heard you mention earlier that it works with a Mac. It doesn't just have to be an Android. It can be a Windows or a Mac or an Android device. You want to talk about that for just a sec?
Sure. Well, I mean, I use it pretty much daily with APRS Droid. I also have a Linux computer here that's running a fill-in digipeater using software called Xastir, Xastir, and that software that will run on either a Mac or Windows. And it's just, I have a Bluetooth dongle stuck in my Linux box, and it's just using that as if it were a serial port. I've also played around with some of the packet radio stuff on Linux, which allows you to basically connect up and chat between two devices using what's called AX25 protocol. And that's pretty cool stuff. There's software for running bulletin boards like JNOS that you can use. On Windows, we've got people using APRS IS32 and a few others. There's people are also trying to use it for just general packet radio. It really wasn't designed specifically for that, but it can be used for that.
So it can be used as a digipeater.
It can be used as a digipeater for sure. I mean, that's what I'm using it for. Now it's not processing a lot of traffic. The one thing that you know. There are limitations with any engineering project. There are trade-offs to be made, and and one of the trade-offs that I made on this is I wanted something that would be easier for people to pick up and to model with an Arduino, which is what kind of this is based off of, and it's pretty easy to play around with. And if you go onto my website, there's a hacking page that actually shows you how to make with an Arduino the basics of what our TNC1 and TNC2 is, but the limitations there are that you don't have a lot of memory. There's no flow control between the Bluetooth serial port, so shoving a lot of data in and out of here, like you would with general packet. You may end up with some packet loss in there.
Okay, and that was one of the questions. Can you use it as a digipeater iGate?
You certainly can. iGate's great. I mean, for receive only stuff, it can receive all day long if you want to just put up an iGate receive site and receive and transmit. I've not hit any traffic limits yet where. Even in Chicago, where we have a lot of traffic here, where it really can't keep up.
I think I should have maybe purchased 3 or 4 more. Now that I'm thinking, I didn't realize that. I'm just thinking it works with APRS Droid, and you've got a Droid phone, and there's your TNC. I didn't realize that it could be. You look at it. Even the pictures online, you can't realize how small this thing is, but it's an amazing piece of technology.
When I designed that case, I had my little Bofang UV3R sitting here, and I said it's got to be smaller than this thing, and it is. It's just about the same size height-wise. It's a little narrower and a little thinner.
That's a great little radio. My kids can't tear them up, and
I love that thing.
I
think that the receiver on that thing is the best of any of the Chinese HTs that I've played around with.
Yeah, I like them. I've got a question here. What about any non-APRS packet uses for this on UHF VHF?
Yeah, so I spoke to that a little bit. There are people that are trying to use it for WinLink and that sort of stuff. I think that there are some issues with some of the software when they're trying to use the serial port over Bluetooth. Some of there's little bugs, because this is fairly new. There aren't, I'm pretty much the only product out there right now that's doing this. There are a few little issues that happen here and there. I'm trying to work with some of these vendors out there and get some of these bugs squashed. So, we're and we want to see this take off. But again, the TNC wasn't designed primarily for general packet use. And you may run into issues with the small buffer size once we do get some of these bugs worked out.
I got you. Well, we had one guy wanted just to tell you thank you for your product and thank you for making it open with the DIY, the Arduino, and even the hack page. So thank you.
Well, that's very important to me, to keep it open. I'm a software engineer, and the open source community is very near and dear to my heart. I've learned so much from the software side and so much on the ham radio side from people that are willing to share their knowledge with me, and it's my responsibility, I think, to do the same and to share that back. I really believe that amateur radio is about advancing the art and science of radio, and the best way to do that is with open source and open hardware.
And I think that's where we're going. I mean, just looking at your product here and what it's capable of doing. And, sorry, my internet connection, guys. Sorry. That's how it works in the country, and you guys have heard that before here on Photime. Going on here, any additional plans for future products? I know the TNC2 just came out, and explain to us why we have this, while we're right here. Tell us about why we went to a TNC2 versus the initial TNC.
Sure. So, the TNC, we created that about 18 months ago. And it was our first product, and, you always learn something once you put something in the market, what works, what doesn't, what people want that you haven't offered. And one of the things that I didn't realize at the time, a lot of people wanted to use the TNC for things like digipeating. They wanted to use it for in their cars. And so there were a few things that we had to do. So we modified the original TNC1 so that it can track the state of the Bluetooth connection. Now, this is really important when you're running a digipeater, because what was happening with the original design is it would queue up all the packets that were being received when there was no serial connection. And if you were doing maintenance on your station and it was queuing up all of these packets, you bring it back up, you have all this old traffic that just got shoved onto the being digipeated back out, and we really don't want to do that when you're running either an iGate or a digipeater. So we need to, when you're running it as a digipeater or an iGate, you turn on connection tracking, and it discards all those packets. Okay. But that was a manual thing that we had to do to each TNC when we did that. And then for the mobile uses, the guys wanted to have the thing turn on automatically when they turned their car on, and turn it off when it turned off. And people were modifying their TNCs to do this. And so I took some of those ideas and thought, I can actually do this pretty easily with a new model. We ran through our initial run, and actually I was in the process of getting this out to the board manufacturer and getting things built. And we actually had a run on our TNCs. I wasn't really expecting to run out when we did, as you noticed. It was really bad timing because we ran out right during the Christmas holidays.
Yeah. Black Friday.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll try not to do that again.
Well, you never know. You never know. And I think that leads us to the next question here we've got from one of our listeners is, where are you seeing the most of your growth for your product purchasing come from? Well,
that's interesting. One of the things that surprised me the most is that we get, half of our sales are outside the U.S. Given the cost of postage and whatnot, I wasn't really expecting that. But yeah, we sell half of our stuff outside the U.S. and then that continues to grow. My goal really is to encourage hams to pick this stuff up and to, either from an operations standpoint or from this technical standpoint, learn a little bit more about APRS and digital radio and some of the embedded systems that we have out there. So you asked earlier what the next things are going to be. One of the things I'm looking at next go around is to make a little more powerful TNC, one that really can handle packet, where we have more memory on board, probably using an ARM processor. Those are a little bit more powerful and will allow us to do things like, 9600 baud. We've had a lot of people asking about 300 baud and some other modes that are out there. And we'd like to support that, but it's kind of hard to do with the limited amount of RAM and the limited amount of processing capabilities in our existing design.
Yeah, and as time goes by, we're sure that those processors will continue to shrink, but at the same time get larger and faster.
They get faster. They consume less power. So with a modern ARM processor, you can get it down to something that's 10 or 12 times as powerful as the current processor on this thing, and draws maybe a little bit slightly more power, but it does add cost, and the programming complexity goes up quite a bit. But those are challenges I think I'm interested in taking on.
Fantastic. So I've got a question here. How does this TNC, and I think we've touched on this some, how does it differ from other things on the market besides being ultra compact and battery operated?
Well, I think that is actually a differentiator commercially, right? That's what people are looking at. There's really nothing much out there that does this, and we were certainly the first to be able to strap onto a radio and HT and go and actually turn any HT into a full-fledged APRS system. So the size, the battery, and the wireless. It's really one wire that you got instead of a whole mess of them that you have with a normal TNC. But the other thing I think that's a big differentiator for us is we've touched on this as well is the openness of the design, and the fact that we're very committed to publishing our schematics. I still need to get the schematics up for the TNC2. That is certainly coming. I just haven't had time given everything else that's been going on. But I think openness is the other major defining characteristic for us.
And that's a question that someone asked. Will this always be your business model? But I can hear the passion in your voice to share it, and you've already told us about that.
Oh yeah,
and absolutely, I can see that. This is you for you to hack.
Nothing gives me more joy than actually seeing people, asking me questions about the source code or, the schematics and, hey, why is this done this way? Somebody asked me the TNC1, it looks like it has a resistor ladder in there, but he looked at the code and it says it's not doing anything with that resistor ladder for generating the tones. And I'm like, yeah, the original design used that as a small DAC. And, we found that the PWM worked better. We had the same pins available and we could, easily switch that out in software. And so answering those sorts of questions gives me no end of joy.
There's a lot of smart people out there in this hobby, and you're one of them, Rob. You've put together something that I think has a great market for, with it being especially the only one available. And I want to encourage our listeners to come check you out. I'm really excited to get this operating. I've got some VHF radios here in the shack that my Elmers have encouraged me to create a digipeater or whatnot, and I've just been I've got a lot of things going on, and I've gone over my list of things Cale has to do this winter, which is longer than Santa's list at Christmas time with the bad kids. But this is one that I think is really going to introduce me personally to an avenue of technology that I haven't even really begun to understand fully yet. Which leads me to a question, and I love this question. This is from John Jacob. And he said he got a digipeater for his TNC, and after reading so many conflicting ways to program it, and all of them warning of catastrophic damage if he did it wrong, he finally unplugged it and put it back in the box. Is there a good source of material on how to properly set up and run a TNC? Whether it's yours or are you familiar? Is there just like a coloring book for kids who want to try to stay in the lines as they kind of try to learn about APRS?
That's a really good question. I think that, if you go to APRS.org, there's a lot of information that Bob Reninga has put together and has collated. There's some really good presentations that he's put together that I think explain a lot of it. But APRS has grown over 20 plus years. I think it's getting closer to 30 now that packet radio has been in use. That there's a lot of information that is pretty old, and so keeping up and figuring out what is really the current, latest and greatest way to do things is tough, and it takes some time to weed through all of that. But there are a few resources, and so there's TAPR has a email a special interest group list for APRS, and there's an APRS Yahoo group that you can join, and a lot of people who know a lot of stuff about this are on those lists and can answer questions and are happy to answer these sorts of questions, because their goal right now is to make sure that people are setting up and running their digipeaters properly and are actually contributing rather than harming the network. It takes
that proper calibration, for a lack of a better term, to make this all play together, right?
Yeah, you have to. If you have a mobile rig or you're running as a digipeater, you're basically part of the larger community, and you really need to set things up and adjust the audio volume and the everything properly for that. Make sure that your TNC is configured properly, and it takes some time and it takes some work, but in most areas you're going to have Elmers around that can help you out. And if you don't, get on the mailing lists and ask the folks, and they're really happy to help. And this is one thing that having a RTL SDR is really helpful for. So if you want to adjust the deviation on your radio, make sure that the sound volume on your radio is set properly, you can actually look at that with an RTL SDR. It's super cheap. You run your radio into a dummy load. You have your RTL SDR tuned to the right frequency, and it will show you just how much bandwidth you're consuming and how much deviation you've got going on there. So that's the sort of thing where these cheap tools that are available to us now that our Elmers never had access to are it's really great to be a ham right now.
I've got one here that just caught my eye. It says, are there any other serial tasks like rig cat control coming from anything that you're doing?
That's a great question. I've just started getting into HF on my side and playing around with rigs that have cat control. So I'm still learning about this stuff myself. So maybe, but I need to know what the real demands are for that sort of stuff. If we do put together a TNC that's designed to be hooked up to an HF rig, I think it would be helpful to support that. But one of the concerns that I have when I'm designing these things is I still strive for portability, and the more connections you have to other devices, the bigger your device becomes, because you have to support all these different ports. I can't answer that question directly, but because I don't know yet. Maybe.
How about recently Yaesu, I believe, introduced a one or two, maybe the last two models of their dual band, dual VFO, VHF, UHF rigs with Bluetooth compatibility. Is that something that you've ever even touched on with your product?
No, not yet. It is something I'm considering for some of the audio stuff that I've just been playing around with, but that I think is where they put Bluetooth in for audio.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I'm not sure how that's going to how much fidelity we get out of the audio, and whether or not it's possible to actually transmit data through there. I've not played around with that yet.
Okay.
But it's something I'm definitely interested in doing.
Fantastic. So you said you're just getting into HF. What have you found in HF that you really enjoy so far?
Well, for me, it's getting back into when I was a kid, just listening to all the radio stations around the world, whether it's VOA, Radio Sophia, some of the stations out in the middle of nowhere. at a time where there was no internet, it really brought the world together. But for me, it's just getting on there and making DX contacts. My first contact on HF was to a site in Cuba, which I thought was really neat. I've made contacts in Brazil and elsewhere, and that's been a lot of fun, especially considering that I have an antenna up on my roof, but it's laying on its side right now because I had to take it down due to heavy winds.
Oh, my.
But for me, what I'm really trying to, what I want to do, I've had a lot of requests from people who would like me to support 300 baud. So, that's really where I think I'm going to be doing. And looking at some of the other digital modes that are available on HF, one of the things that I would like to start playing around with is some of the more interesting digital modes. And the stuff that we're using right now for APRS is pretty old and crafty. It's getting long in the tooth. It does great for what it is, which is getting data across a voice channel. Mm-hmm. But it has no forward error correction in it, which is important for signals that may fade or get noisy. It gives you a lot of additional resistance to noise in a channel, whereas the AFSK that we're using right now, one little blip in there, one bit that's off, and that whole packet goes away. And so I would like to start experimenting with that and seeing what it would take to improve the state of the art in that regards.
Wow, and that's interesting. I really enjoy digital on 20 and whatnot, but it's always, for me, it's never enough time to get up here and get to do it. But when I do, I really enjoy that as much as I do talking. and I'm a talker, but I really enjoy the digital stuff.
I found FL Digi and being able to get on there and play around with it and all the different modes that it supports. It's incredible. That
could be an entire program we could cover, just FL Digi. What a wonderful program that's free. And,
I think you'd probably want to cover, all,
one mode at a time.
A lot of time with it, not just one episode, because there's so many different modes and why you would choose one mode over another. I think there's a whole art and science to that itself.
Exactly. And for what you're doing, Rob, we're greatly appreciative. We understand that for the hobby to continue to grow and for nerds like me to have things to do in the future and to introduce my children to, we need folks who are innovating, and we appreciate your innovation and your contribution to the hobby. Give us your website one more time.
Sure, it's www.mobilinkd.com, MOBILINKD.
And we'll have that and a lot more in our show notes on the program page here at amateurradio15.com, or the newly released abbreviated URL at ITSFOTIME. It's photime.com. So I got some complaints about guys trying to thumb in the URL for amateurradio15.com, and I'd forgot to mention that when I purchased URLs for the program last summer that I purchased a short one, and I've been holding out, and I really apologize, guys. But Rob, we appreciate you being with us, and I really would like to, in the near future, have you come back and talk to us about the SDR dongle. There's a lot of things that we can do in the hobby with and for that, and I've got one, and I really want to get it running the software to track the air traffic, and for whatever reason, I've run into a brick wall, so I'll have to cross that bridge, but we'd love to have you come back.
Well, I've really enjoyed the conversation with you today, and I'd love to come back and talk about this. Anytime I can talk about amateur radio, I'm happy to do so. Fantastic.
Guys, it's Rob Riggs. His call is Whiskey X-Ray 9 Oscar, and he's from the Chicago, Illinois area. You can find him online again at www.mobilinkd.com, and that's just LINKD. Another great show, in my opinion, and I hope that you'll agree, right here on Photime, the other ham radio podcast. Yeah, man, Rob, thanks so much for being with us. You really educated us not only on your TNC2, but also APRS. I still think there's a lot more that we can learn from this guy, so hope we have him on again really soon. Folks, thanks for listening. Thank you for participating in our listener survey. It's there in the show notes today. If you haven't yet participated, feel free. If you've already participated and you forgot to say something, I won't be mad if you do it again. Check it out. It's Photime.com. All right, don't forget our show sponsor, Main Trading Company. If you need some gear, they can take care of you. And if you want some swag, some merchandise from the Photime podcast, we've got a link up to the new APRS store. T-shirts, coffee mugs, whatever. We've got it printed. Yep, even your Snuggie. So thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next time on the Photime podcast. God bless you guys, 73.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and subscribing to AmateurRadio15.com presents Photime, the other ham radio podcast. You can find our past episodes, web links, and more at AmateurRadio15.com. That's AmateurRadio15.com. Follow us on Twitter at Photime Podcast, and remember to visit our show sponsor, Main Trading Company, at mtcradio.com. Till next time, 73s.